Hope you guys are doing well. I'm Sarah. If you're watching this later, this is a deconstruction chat. So for people who are questioning their faith or deconstructing their faith and just kind of want a place to talk and ask questions. I also do this over on TikTok. So if you're also a TikTok user, you can come find me over there. I do it more frequently, but I'm just here on YouTube right now on Tuesday nights. So yeah, if anyone's interested, here's Ruby. Here for the naps always. Come for the deconstruction, but stay for the animals. So usually when I when I do this on TikTok, I figured out how to have like a sticker here so that we can like see a topic. But I haven't figured out a good way to do that here on YouTube. Oh, I know, Ruby's the best. She's such a good dog. So yeah, hi John, good to see you. I'm trying to figure out a better way to I don't know, easily show the topics so we have something to chat about. So right now I have it in the title. I don't know if that's helpful. Hi, Daniel. Oh, thanks so much, Chip. I really appreciate that. That's really kind. Yeah, Justin's the best for sure. Well, the topic I picked, at least for our title tonight, was you don't have to be perfect to be good. I grew up in evangelical Christianity, particularly, that really emphasized how, like, if we weren't perfect, then we were bad and evil, and that we deserved hell. Hi, Dr. Joe. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and, to the follower only for our comments. Hi, Kel. Hello, Stephen. Might as well get ahead of the game so we don't have to read creepy messages from mean people. So yeah, anyway, I was talking about, especially in evangelical Christianity, the two options are perfect and terrible. And there seems to be nothing in between. And I think that leads a lot of us to feel like, okay, well, if I don't meet this standard of perfection, I'm bad. And that's definitely one of the things like I've had to learn over the years, is that you can be a good person even though you're not perfect. John says, I remember when I was a Catholic always going to confession. Looking back at it now, that was so weird, especially because you start in like 3rd grade. That's always hard too, when you try to tell kids that they're sinful, like they're kids. Hi, Spark, so good to see you. Hello, Brazil. Sorry, that's not a question for this forum. Oh, that's funny. Chip says, I'm a type B perfectionist because I'm a dentist, not because I used to be a Christian. Yeah, well, for me, it's interesting. I'm very type B. And it's like the one area of my life for a really long time that I still was like perfectionist about. I think especially for those of us who grew up in it, like I remember being 5 years old and knowing that I like deserved hell. Um, UT, you're asking me how to pick up girls, and that's not what we're doing here. Yeah, having the name Chip as a dentist is funny. Well, hey, Lem, welcome. Hi, J Cal. Eve, hello. Nice spark. I've spent most of my life wishing that I was more type A. Thanks. Hi, Rando. So this channel is for people who are like leaving their faith, deconstructing their faith, questioning their faith, and they just kind of want a place to talk about it. Well, if you're just joining, hey, and we were chatting about for those of us who grew up in the faith that need to like be perfect all the time. Oh, Joe says, hi, Sarah, new to the channel, newly deconstructed from Christianity. I'm going to be talking to our pastor soon. Any advice? What kind of talk are you going to have with your pastor? Like what's their goal and what's your goal? Hi, Rachel. Hi, J Cal. Thanks for the super chat. J Cal says, is it me or is the picture straight? Does it look straight to you now? Because I feel like when I look back at it, it's crooked. Agion says, just wondering, are you more against God or people in the church? Well, I'm not against anyone. I no longer believe in God. Joe says, not sure. Pastor just found out about my deconstruction, I'm assuming. Yeah. So my only question would be like, right away, kind of establishing what you all want from this conversation, because if that's the case, most likely, and this is just a guess, but most likely that pastor is going to want to try to convert you back. And so I would just say be prepared for that. And if that's not a conversation you want to have, I would just state that boundary from the outset. Hi, Bailey. I was a Christian. I am not any longer. Oh, yeah. K Skull says, at 17, I joined a youth group with about 15 people. Was going well until we had a group praying in tongues. Yeah, the prayer in tongues can be pretty intense. Okay, well then that's good, Joe. Then I think you'll have a good conversation. Agion says, well, I want to say I know you obviously were Christian, so you already know this, but I'm Wesleyan and we believe it's not about being perfect or religion, it's relationship with Jesus. Right, but most Christians believe that if you don't have that relationship with Jesus, then what you deserve is to go to hell. And the reason you deserve to go to hell if you don't have Jesus is because you aren't meeting God's standard of perfection and holiness. Lem says, I've been noticing more atheists who are leading the way with being kind, calm, and moral, not the angry atheist vibes. Christians should take notes so we can have more productive conversations. Yeah, thanks, Lem. And, it's interesting that I have sometimes tried to give Christians feedback, like the way that they are approaching things. I'll say, hey, you'll actually be more successful if you take the time to listen. And Christians never take my advice. Like, look, coming from a non-Christian, this is how this would go well, but it never seems to work. Well done, Charles. Allie, I used to be Christian. I no longer am. Which school? Do you mean which denomination or like which division? I was Protestant. Hi, Brian. What's your opinion on Islam? I am so much more familiar with Christianity than I am Islam, but I don't believe in any God, so it's kind of a moot point for me personally. Sorry, Dave. Nah, you're not late, Brian. What made you leave the faith? I just stopped believing that it was true. I'm drinking like a electrolyte drink. It's not very exciting. Joe's asking, how do I help my marriage through my deconstruction? Yeah, that's really tough. And it also depends on like how she, how she feels about it, what her perceptions are. And so my only like general advice is, support and communication. And depending on how strong and effective your communication is, maybe even getting a marriage counselor could be helpful just to figure out how to communicate about this. But I don't really have any more specific advice. Chip says, Sarah, I remember watching your deconstruction story video. It seemed like your passion for science wasn't really part of it. Yeah, that's correct. It wasn't like I, took more biology classes and realized evolution was true and stopped believing. The science really wasn't a big part of it. Like I could accept science and believe in God. And I think, those two things don't have to be enemies. I think you can accept science and believe in God. You're welcome, Ajian. Are you a student of biology? My actual area of expertise is physiology. Super says, I'm an atheist who just got back into theology. Personally, you either just believe in God or you don't. Man, I wish I could clearly communicate that to Christians. I have tried so many ways to communicate that to Christians, that belief isn't a choice, but it never seems to go well. You're welcome, Joe. Yeah, Laura, YouTube's a little rougher than TikTok. Yeah, Kel says, me too. My degree was in high school biology education, and I was comfortable to believe God had a hand in guiding evolution. Yeah, I totally think that a lot of people are that way too. Hi. What's the most frustrating thing Christians assume about your moral beliefs, and how can we do better? Well, so many Christians assume I don't have any morals. And they take the idea of subjective morality to mean no morals exist, and that I view all different types of actions as the same. So I think Christians maybe don't realize how flexible their moral system actually is. John says, a big thing for me was when I realized that religion seems to be a psychological phenomena. Yeah, a lot of it is happening internally. Reality says, fundamentally speaking, Christianity has to be a choice. Otherwise, God is cruel or God didn't give free will. Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think Christians argue with me when I say, look, I didn't choose to stop believing. Like, it was something that happened to me. Christians have to make it my fault somehow. Because if it's not my fault, then it's God's. And it can't be God's fault. So it must be my fault somehow. Brian says, religion has done a good job of creating community and meaning for people. What do you think we should do in the absence of religion to fulfill the void left once people no longer believe? Well, one, I certainly think religion will always exist. But I think there are other ways to meet those same psychological needs. We can still create communities just around different things. You can still get really involved in your local town and city. You can get involved in groups around your hobbies and your interests. You can really kind of dive deeper into your friendships and start relying more on human people to help you through troubles rather than prayer. So I mean, um, I think it's definitely possible to get those same things. Raymond, I don't believe in God. No, David, it wasn't that I had a judgy church. Yeah, John says to give us a choice, he would have to present us with evidence and then let us choose to actually worship him or not. Yeah, if the whole thing is supposed to be about us having choice, then God hiding his existence doesn't make any sense. I mean, we would be so much better equipped to make a choice if we had all the information. Yeah, Kel says, and I no longer feel bad telling people who cross my boundaries that I don't want to hang out with them. Church always made me feel like I had to accept people with bad behavior. Hi, Taboo. Reality says not necessarily your fault per se. That's a lot of qualification there in you not believing. The devil has a simple goal, so the devil can manipulate and separate you. So if it's not my fault and the devil just took me away from God, why would God allow that to happen? Is the devil more powerful than God? What do you believe? I don't believe in anything supernatural. Then how can you explain the soul spirit stuff? I don't think we have a soul. I think we have consciousness and we have emotions and love, but I don't think that we have a soul. Um, yeah, Allie says the happening of bad things is not always by choice, but by nature. Well, if you believe in God, God designed everything. So in a system with God, there's no such thing as like a natural consequence because God designed all of the consequences of things. He designed nature and how it would function. Lem says, do you think religion is almost a necessary evil like government politics? Do you think there are any benefits to religion, or do you think the world would be better without it? I think it's sort of like, yeah, like government in that, there's no perfect form of government, and if you eliminate government, some sort of rule and organization is still going to be there. So I think we will always have some kind of religion. What religion looks like might evolve over time. I do think many religions can be a benefit. I think religions that focus on love and compassion, that are inclusive, that really emphasize caring for others and caring for the planet, like those might be a net positive. I think the condemnation and the judgment are things we should keep examining. Robin asks, what happens when we die? I don't know for sure. My best guess is nothing. Like we just cease existing. Hi, video games. I'm fine, thanks. Hey, David. Reality says God gives us free will. I'm not saying it wasn't your choice to disbelieve. You're kind of dancing around the point. If my lack of belief is not my fault, it would not make sense for God to punish me for not believing. And if I don't have control over whether Satan or the devil is messing with my mind, again, it makes no sense for God to punish me for that. Hey, Matthew. Andrew says, I was raised in a Christian home, became a Christian, but now I'm really wondering why I did. Compared to others, they ended up way better off than I did. I seem to be struggling all the time. I'm really sorry to hear that, Andrew. The organization Recovering from Religion might be really helpful. All of their resources on there are free and accessible. So this is a great example of Christians not really listening to what I'm saying and making it my fault because they can't accept that it wasn't. Raymond says, I'm sorry, but God gave you life and God did not want you to stop believing. He was giving you signs and you ignored it. You have no idea what my story is or what happened to me, but somehow you know what God was thinking and you know what actions I took or didn't take. That's kind of the mental gymnastics that you have to do to make sure that you can feel like it's my fault. I'm wearing shorts, you crazy people. Game says you have to know that there will be consequence after death. I don't know. No, I don't think that there will be. I think I don't think we have any actual evidence that there's life after death. What is your opinion on Catholicism? I'm Catholic, and almost all non-religious people say many horrible stereotypes, but I'm curious. So, Chloe, yeah. Yeah, I grew up Protestant, and so I've been to many Catholic services, but that was not like my theological upbringing. But it's honestly not all that different from Protestantism. You know, I have some of the same qualms with it, and so I see some of the same benefits. So I don't have anything like dramatically different to say about Catholicism. Carson says, you know that one thing that always happens no matter what church size is they ask for money. Yeah, there's a great George Carlin bit about that. You're welcome, Chloe. Hi, Andrew. I understand that Catholicism and Protestantism have big theological differences, but the main point is still enough the same that I have the same concerns and see the same benefits. So for people asking why I'm no longer a Christian, I have an FAQ on my page. And so I have a video kind of giving my whole backstory. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I am American. I'm sure you can tell by my accent. Diane says, I believe there is a God. Religion just made it about men. Well, that's fair. Hi, Jules. Do you recognize the Bible as the best book ever written, just not inerrant? Like Bart Ehrman? Bart Ehrman said it was the best book ever written? I don't know that I would give it that categorization. I'm doing fine, Jules. Thanks for asking. What's an ex-Christian? It's someone who used to be a Christian and now is not. What categorization would you give it? I would give it like ancient literature. I mean, I do think it's ancient writing that is people talking about what their life was like and what they perceived God to be. And, some of it's record keeping, some of it's poetry, some of it's letters. I don't think it's true, like as far as the supernatural claims in it. I can do that. It's funny, I get this a lot. I can do that as saying that my identity is consumed by being non-Christian, and I get that a lot, and it makes me think like just because the only place you see me is on the internet, that doesn't mean that's where I live. Like I have a job and hobbies and friends, and none of this that has anything to do with not being a Christian. How do you deal with hard times? So I definitely learned some more coping strategies and tools to deal with difficult emotions after I left Christianity. I spent some time in therapy. If you have access to therapy for anyone going through this process, I would definitely recommend it. Um, it was just really helpful, like giving me those tools to manage the difficult emotions. But also I have a pretty strong support system, so I have friends and family that I can lean on in difficult times. Do you know much about the Bible that you made a choice not to believe? So, Game, you've been here for a little while. You heard me explain that it was not a choice. I did not choose to stop believing. But yes, I know quite a lot about the Bible. Um, what are your ideas about what caused the invention of God within humanity? Seems to be a common thread across mankind. Yeah, I think that God and religion are those perspectives really feel good to us humans psychologically. It meets a lot of our needs. It can quell the fears that we have about the things that we can't control, because then you think, no, this benevolent being is controlling all those scary things that I don't have control over. It can give you a sense of purpose. It can quell your fears about death. It can give you community. So I think there's a lot of things that humans are just attracted to. Japanese says, even though I wasn't raised explicitly Christian, I still deal with thoughts about what if I'll go to hell. It's that pervasive. Do you get that? So I can tell you that's probably one of the most common questions I get asked is how do you get over the fear of hell? And I think it goes to show how scary of an idea that particularly evangelicals have created. Like, what is the scariest thing imaginable, the worst imaginable outcome, and it's infinite and never ending? Um, no wonder you're afraid of it, right? That's the worst possible outcome. Um, One thing you might find helpful, I don't know, is the organization recovering from religion, they have a lot of resources and support groups and links to secular therapists. And so you might find more people to connect with and just more resources to help through that part. Bailey says, honestly, it doesn't make sense to me why Christians come into spaces like this just to spam stuff about their religion. All it does is make their religion look bad. It is interesting, every time I do lives like this, it's usually at least half Christians. Do you believe in a higher power? I do not, no. What made you realize you were no longer a Christian? I remember it was a long process. So it was like a year-long process of questioning and wrestling with things. And then I remember just one day after all of that, I just didn't believe it was true anymore. Cornbread, yelling on here about how scary hell is not helping anyone. Hi, Minnie. Spoonfed says, I had no idea this type of support existed. Thank you. I grew up in the International Churches of Christ and it was a cult. Hi, Spoonfed. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. I'm also on TikTok, Spoonfed, if you use that app as well. Hugh, I don't know why you think Christianity is the most accurate religion. It's really strange. And I'm wondering if you heard that from a Christian. Thanks, Fairy. No, I don't feel like God is still pursuing me. I genuinely feel like he doesn't exist. Oh, well, that's good, Spoonfed. You're welcome, Japanese. Reality says, well, I had a very similar experience. I deconstructed, but I came back to the faith. So yeah, when people go through deconstruction, they end up in all kinds of places. Some people deconstruct like their more fundamentalist beliefs, but they remain Christian. Some people deconstruct Christianity, but they keep believing in God. And, some people come all the way to being atheist. So yeah, I'm not surprised that you ended up in a different place than I did. Minnie says, it's such a relief to not believe in God. Zuper says, I'm also ex-Christian, but I haven't told my family yet. So I'm still going to church and other things because I don't want to have that conversation and have someone try to change my mind. I completely understand that. One of the most frustrating and painful things was when I started telling, my friends at church that I was questioning. um, the way they responded was so isolating. Like all they ever wanted to talk about was converting me back, and um, and it sucked. So I understand that fear. Did you go to church in the past? Yeah, so I was a very devout Christian, um, like my whole life through my mid 20s. So I spent a lot of time in church, a lot of time, reading the Bible and praying and all those things. Would there be anything that could bring you back to God? Well, we'd have to start with, I'd have to first even believe that God exists. So that would be step one. And I would need evidence for that. Did you even go on Wednesdays? I did go on Wednesdays too. Do you think there's a difference between religion and relationship with God? I know there's a difference in the way that Christians use those two terms, but if we look at the actual definition of those terms, no. If you have a relationship with a deity, like if you worship a deity, that is by definition a religion. The way that Christians use it is they say the word religion is all legalistic and based on rules, but not us. We have a relationship with God. But that's still religion. Religion doesn't mean rules. Lethal, you can watch my FAQs for that whole backstory. O says, I feel like it's better to believe than not because what do you lose in believing compared to losing everything if you don't? So you're assuming that there are only two choices, your particular belief system or nothing. But from someone who doesn't believe in any God, there are actually almost infinite choices. And if what you're saying is, hey, there's no cost to believing, you might as well hedge your bets. Well, then you should believe in every religion. There's no cost to believing, right? What do you lose? Just believe in all of them. Bailey says, I feel like you can't form a loving relationship on worship anyways. So I never got having a relationship with God because having to worship something just didn't leave room for a relationship. Yeah, and that's such a good point. When you are supposed to be in a relationship with a perfect being, it is mentally exhausting to be in a relationship where you always mess up and you're always apologizing to the other person and they never mess up. And it's really mentally draining to try to be in a relationship like that. Whew, this is a scary question. Agion says, so if we don't believe in anything beyond here, once we die, we cease to be. What's the motivation to not commit crime and kill and do evil? It just seems like it'd be all relative then. So, Agion, are you saying that the only reason you don't do those things is because you're worried that heaven might be at stake? Like, if you didn't believe in an afterlife, you would just go take people's lives? Because the thing is, I know that Christianity teaches you that deep down you're really bad and you need God to restrain you. But the vast majority of people don't want to cause harm. Now we do. We're human, but most people don't ever want to go end someone's life. That's Most people think that's horrible on its own without a God. As humans, we have empathy. We understand what someone else's pain is like, and we don't want to cause people pain. Agian, so the idea that, again, atheists do have a moral compass. Instead of getting our moral rules from God, we're getting them from logic and empathy. But here's the problem with your logic there. So Agion says, I think more without a moral compass with atheism and relativity, then ultimately everything wouldn't matter. If you get your morals from God, that means that anything God tells you to do, you have to label as good. And anything that God doesn't like, you just have to label as bad. And those definitions aren't based in, are you causing harm to people? It's just, what does God like and what does God dislike? And under that system, any act is permissible as long as God condones it. And you see this all over the Old Testament. I mean, God commands people to do terrible things in the Old Testament, but it's all okay because God said it was okay. And I'm not sure that's a good moral system either. Nerd says, it's crazy that Christians appear to only be doing good for a reward. Yeah, the idea that, like, well, heaven is what I really care about, so I'm going to do good now to, make God happy or ensure my spot in heaven or build up treasure in heaven. Versus if I'm kind to someone, it's just because I want to be kind to them. Ross says, hey, I'm Christian, non-denominational. You said God commanded people to do terrible things, such as eliminate whole people groups, um, separately going to war and taking the virgins for yourselves. He gave hundreds of laws, and some of those laws included how you should treat your slaves and how you're allowed to beat them, just not too hard. There was a lot of just kind of awful stuff that happens in the Old Testament that God commands and or condones explicitly. Lily says, the concept of hell itself is dehumanizing, being okay with unimaginable suffering for eternity. Yeah, I think a lot of Christians, and myself included when I was a Christian, by the way, so I'm including myself in this. We justify hell in usually one of two ways. One is we say it's really only for really bad people. Everyone who's kind of good, they're going to end up choosing Christ in the end. So we don't really have to worry about it because it's just really hard-hearted bad people, which isn't a great defense. And the other defense is, well, it's not God's fault. Like people just choose it. I cannot tell you the thousands of times people have said, no, God doesn't send anyone to hell. You send yourself. It's your choice. And so then the existence of eternal suffering is put upon you, and God gets to walk away scot-free. Um, Even though that doesn't actually make sense to what they think is happening. Good night, Donald. Zuper says, now that I don't believe, I feel like a ton of weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Do you respect Christians and religious people? Yeah, of course. I was one for a really long time. Hi, Haley. Jason says, hell is not a Bible teaching. Yeah, that's another really interesting facet of this, that Christians don't agree with each other on, does hell exist? If it does, who goes there? And if it does, what is it like? Brian says, this is one of the things that really started my leaving faith. It was studying the Bible to understand people made the whole saving the innocent children thing, or made up saving the innocent children thing. So it was kids in hell for me. Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to figure out what happens when young children and babies lose their lives, I think for an evangelical Christian, both options are really problematic. If you say they go to heaven, I mean, that on its face seems like the most reasonable answer. But that means that those children and babies never got to utilize their free will. They never got to choose, do they want heaven or hell? They never got to choose to accept Jesus. And so it's like God gets to waive the requirement for them. That it's not really necessary for you to accept Jesus to go to heaven, because God can just waive that for people. But the opposite, if it's really like, no, there is this spiritual law, it's impossible for people to enter heaven unless they've accepted Jesus, and that's a firm law, well, then God creating a place where children and babies suffer is even more abhorrent. Have a good night, Ajian. David, I'm so sorry for your loss. Hi, X. Oh, I'm drinking like a electrolyte drink. I've been very dehydrated all day. Oh, hello from Japan. Oh, big sigh, Ruby. For those of you who have not met Ruby, this is Ruby, my giant dog. She does a lot of snoozing. Do you believe in the afterlife and Judgment Day? I don't, no. I don't know where the bunny is. She must have put herself to bed. Oh, wow, Tomo, how's that going? Zane says, I like the belief that there are many different rivers, but the water is all the same. I know I've heard a metaphor about like, as humans, we're trying to get to the top of the mountain and, you know, there's a lot of paths, but eventually they all take you to the top of the mountain. No, Brian. Checkers has a cage, but it's open all the time. And so she can roam the house or then hop into her cage. Do you believe in assessing higher awareness? I don't know what that is. Yeah, Diane, isn't it a lovely metaphor? Oh, Brian, I thought you meant something else. Yeah, Jason, I know that the Bible says that there's only one faith. Me too, Kel. That's interesting, supernatural. You know, Warped, I'd actually love to talk about purity culture on here, but with the crazy comments we've been getting tonight, I'm a little worried about it. What's your favorite and least favorite thing about not being Christian anymore? My favorite thing is that I feel like I'm allowed to accept myself. I don't have to think I'm a bad person. My least favorite thing is I miss I miss the certainty I used to have, and I miss the music.
Oh, what a big stretch for such a big doggy.
Yeah, Jason, I know that Christians don't agree with the multiple paths, that it goes directly against their belief system. And I didn't like that explanation when I was a Christian either. But I think it makes sense. Are you atheist? So I consider myself an agnostic atheist. I don't believe in God, but I also don't think I can ever really know for sure. If you exercise the awareness you have, it will expand. I don't really know what that means either. No, Lem, I'm not familiar. Yeah, Lily, I agree. I mean, the way that the human brain, the physicality of the human brain has such a huge impact on consciousness and personality. Um, the idea of also having a spiritual soul doesn't really make sense because it's your experience and who you are is so directly linked to your physical being. All right. I I think I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I do this most evenings on TikTok. Same handle, Leaving Faith. And so I'm here every Tuesday night, and then I'm on TikTok most other nights. And on my main page, I have Justin and I from Deconstruction Zone have a series, and um, we should be dropping a new episode this week. So thanks, friends.